Welcome to today's Alex Views. We'll be covering entrances into Charlotte via the southeast. Here we are on South Tryon Street. Now, looking at this lot here, clearly it was residential at one point. And I like the trees. They would have been nice in a backyard. It's amazing to me to think that very recently, within the last 3 generations, there were just homes here. We're about to go over the Belk Expressway, 277 here. So this would have been like a natural obstacle historically as well. It's low-lying. I think they cut it down even deeper, but I think there was a creek there at one point. And then pretty much immediately after we cross this entrance, we are in Uptown. It's very dramatic, and it's changing. There's more commercial and tower south of that entrance, but historically this was where we were. There weren't even towers here. When I moved to Charlotte, there weren't towers here. This was kind of light manufacturing. There was a newspaper plant and an auto repair shop here. So all this sprung up only in the last 10 years. But it's gleaming, as you can see. So that's the South Tryon Street entrance. This is the main entrance. That's like the showstopper entrance into Uptown, Charlotte. Now we're coming up the South College Street entrance. So this one's interesting to me because this, I think, was built primarily as part of what was the old Independence Boulevard back when Charlotte was much smaller. This is almost like a belt route around Charlotte. And this bridge is one of the last vestiges of it. When I do my proper Uptown Charlotte video, we'll explore it a little more. But this is as 20th century as it gets as you go further down College Street. So it's just towers. It's one way. Speeds are designed to be high because, again, it was a bypass route. Uptown was the center of the city was blocks away at this point, so it would come down this little hill. It would take a right actually, rather than continuing down College Street. We'll see it in the later video, just what happened in the 20th century. But now it's interesting. If I were to turn the camera around, you'd see a big tower going in behind it. And this one-way traffic here, it made sense in the 20th century. But, I wonder if it's more a hindrance than a good, does more harm than good in today's day and age. That's the entrance, very quick entrance. This one I wanted to capture for posterity. So this is the rail trail entrance. So this is an unfinished entrance. In the past, we had this rail trail here, and we still have the rail trail. So they built so this was Norfolk Southern used to have this was the boundary of Uptown, right? Remember that rail that we saw coming from the east. So this was initially freight, and would go down to South End. And then they stopped using it in the middle of the 20th century because everyone stopped using it. And they built the city. They retrofit the city for trucks because they still had to move all the freight. And we'll explore that a little bit. You'll see it's prominent here. But then in the late 20th century or early 21st century, they built this light rail scheme. And there's been a lot of housing development around it. But the plan was to extend it over the interstate. And that's coming. It's always been coming soon. And here I just wanted to capture for posterity that, because supposedly one day it will be done, but it just kind of ended. Caution, end of sidewalk. And you have to go up and out of the railway and across that bridge on College Street or Tryon Street. Okay, now we're coming up through South Boulevard. So this is the old federal highway that goes, it turns into, we're going to go underneath the highway here now. So we're going to go underneath Moorhead. So this is, you remember from the Moorhead walks, we go over South Boulevard. Here we are going underneath it. They built this as a bypass before there was the highway. And then they just kept it. But before they built that bypass, this area used to be called Moorhead Square, and it was a lively commercial hub. I would love to see them connect Moorhead with South Boulevard again and just force the high-speed traffic onto the expressway where it belongs. That's why we get the federal funding for it. We should use it. But then but that would be transformative, I think, in my opinion. And then you have all this empty space here. So we're seeing like but it's lawn, it's mowed lawn, which is interesting. It's not like your traditional Piedmont forest. I think they need to do that for sightlines or whatever. But I don't know, it's very dramatic. You get these dramatic sweeping views, and there's a value there, I suppose. But here we are going across, traffic's moving, and we're coming up the old federal highway across onto, we're going to go all the way up to what's called Brooklyn Village Boulevard. So by this point, the old Independence Boulevard would have taken a right, would have veered right, and it would go to an area of town now called Midtown, or then called Midtown. It was where our first shopping mall was in Charlotte. And you can see this road is still really, really big, really wide. It's in 6 lanes in some points. And there's a dearth of development around it, probably because it's kind of hostile to, it's a car sewer, I think is what they call it. All right, now here's an entrance. We're coming out of the expressway. This is what it looks like. And it connects to South Boulevard there, which turns into a street called Caldwell once it crosses over Brooklyn Village. I think we'll come up Brooklyn Village. We'll talk more about that. Here's the exit. So that exit is a collection of exits and traffic bypasses. And you can kind of see old Charlotte, right? It's like, oh, there's the old Charlotte that it was originally bypassing, right? It's just kind of a lane. What was there before? I mean, I've seen pictures, and we'll explore more when I do a proper. Well, we'll explore more as we come from the east. We do come up this Brooklyn Village Boulevard. That's one of the next ones, actually.
Davidson Street.
All right, so here we're coming up McDowell Street, and this is an endangered view. So this is where Charlotte's like medical research hub is being put. And I think we got like Wake Forest. We have some association with Wake Forest's teaching hospital. So here again, auto repair, mid-20th century auto repair shops. To the left, I don't see it, but there's this historic building, which is like, oh gosh, I forget the name of it now. But it was like a place to be in the in olden days. And then you get this great view. There are backlots there off Moorhead. I've done some exploration on Moorhead in the past. Those are the backlots to Moorhead. And again, these are the new medical research towers and medical research labs that are going in. So those 2 new buildings are residential, and this street kind of looks like this now, but even as we go further along, you'll see that it's changed, but it's back to 4 lanes. So I mean, this is another street that they made 4 lanes before they had the expressway, the Independence Connector, and they just kind of kept it, and traffic goes too fast on it. It's kind of, you can't walk on it, you can't really enjoy it unless you're you can't even enjoy it in a car, really, because it's stoplight after stoplight after stoplight. It's like the worst of both worlds. It reflects like when it was laid out in the 1940s. They cleared land, they made it 4 lanes in the 1940s, so that, again, trucks could get around, because Charlotte was this big, like, shipping freight distribution hub at the time. And then they just kind of kept it because there's just like institutional inertia. But when we explore we'll explore, I don't know if we'll explore this road in particular, but there's a lot of opportunities. So here's Brooklyn Village Boulevard. So again, this is the old Independence. So if we were to turn right there, that would take us to a shopping center that's been repurposed, and then it would take us to community college, and then it would take us to the current Independence Expressway. We're just accessing it from the wall, so to speak, which is the interstate here. We've already crossed over the Sugar Creek. We're just about at the Sugar Creek natural barrier. And there's this big sort of empty space between these natural barriers and the real barriers of the 19th century city. And I mean, I love this. At fall, look how verdant it is with the trees changing and stuff. It's a nice little panache of nature. And that is something that I do like about the interstates and how they were designed. And that, like, they're still loud, they're still noisy, but in many places they were able to line them with trees. Maybe as a pollution mitigation measure, I'm not quite sure. But it provides for shade and some natural beauty and some calmness. I saw somewhere a sign that said, like, just looking at trees reduces stress. I think that's true here. But you can see, I mean, if you look at the width of this road, it's really underused. So traffic goes fast, and it's super wide. The nice thing, though, is, like, if 60 years ago, you could pull a semi-trailer down it, and that was helpful and important at the time. We're going up the sidewalk, and here we are crossing over Caldwell. So the name Brooklyn Village Boulevard is indicative of the fact that there was a community here, an African-American community historically called Brooklyn. And prior to that, I saw it referred to as Logtown. So in the wake of the Civil War, a lot of newly freed people came to Charlotte for freedom. And I'm not going to speak to whether or not they found it necessarily, but this is where they lived. So the initial industry post-war was logging. We live in a forest on the East Coast, and it had yet to be exploited in Charlotte in large measure. So that's what they did. We're close to the railroad tracks. Those railroad tracks were there, and they needed them to develop nationally. So it was Logtown. That's what people did. And then subsequently, cotton production became much more important, both for domestic and non-domestic use. But the factories for the cotton would be on, like, if you look on the upper right, you'll see this, like, elevated platform type situation. I don't know for sure if there was a factory there or if there were, like, houses there. I think the factories were closer to the railroad, and then there were along this downsloping all the way down to the Sugar Creek. There were kind of like shotgun houses. I'm not sure if they had water or piping or anything like that. I found an example of one that I will I'll put in the synopsis video. But here we are at South Boulevard. We still have a little bit further to go. So what's fun? So that's like that. We see now we're in the Gleaming City, and it's spreading. It's spreading eastward across the railroad. It's done this in the last 10 years or so, 15 years. If you go on Google Street View, you can see this as nothing was there, right? And when you need to get newspaper trucks in and out and to all points around the city, maybe it made sense to have a street this wide. But I mean, I can just look at it and imagine taking a lane or two away, because it goes down to one lane across Tryon Street, and although I'm not sure you'd be able to do that next to the NASCAR Hall of Fame, but just having Grand Boulevard, kind of like a linear park or something, people can hang out, and you can get traffic to other parts of town. Still in Uptown, still in that loop, but not necessarily in the classic 19th century railroad loop, which is just, I mean, it's so impressive, this view here. All right. So we've crossed under the old 19th century barrier. This is the rear college, which will be a fun exploration. I want to do the inner core video. All right, now we're coming up East 3rd Street. So we are well on the other side of the natural barrier, on the other side of Sugar Creek. I've done this walk before. At sunset, I tried to do it, I think. We're going past, so where we are, this is the old orphanage. So think back to the 19th century. This is the edge of town. There was a dairy farm here and an orphanage. And then it was Brooklyn, across the creek and a little bit south of the creek. The factories, and then there was the old shopping center of Uptown, and there was residential. Anyway, so this is one of the last vestiges of the old dairy farm and orphanage is that chapel. And in the later, and I think in the 1980s, if you look off, just there's that round looking monument. That's the Vietnam War Memorial. It's inscribed with just a telling of the war. I tried reading it for Veterans Day, but I didn't want to be accused. Well, first off, I misread it, and I didn't film it right. And then also didn't want to be accused of stealing valor or whatever. So I didn't but I learned a lot. I think everyone should read about it. It was just I don't know. Maybe I'll partner with somebody to actually do it who has that kind of background. And serve in the military, but like most people from the Northeast, they kind of grew up commonly, like members of my family, immediate family did. So, and of it, it's a mixed blessing at that, but anyway, I didn't get into it. We're crossing over the Sugar Creek here. It's the Greenway. It's beautiful. It was beautiful this late fall. I mean, it was amazing. And here we see what we did in this like beautiful Creek, Greenway, Riverway. We built this highway. And you know what? The cars do have to go somewhere. It's just how it is. But then we cross under, so we're underneath the outer barriers, and it's very verdant, right? It's a beautiful linear park, aside from the fact that there's loud 3,000-pound cars going 60 miles an hour through it. And then we'll go up to the next. It'll be Caldwell, and you'll see it's 4 lanes, because again, we used to have to get the trucks in and out before there was the highway, and we just left it. But I mean, it's easy to imagine, right, in the future, like the soon-to-be future. So one of the reasons why cars are so really useful in places like the Piedmont is because the hills are really formidable. I mean, on a bike, you can hear me huffing and puffing and getting up this hill. But I've been up this stuff on like electric scooters. I've been up it on e-bikes and stuff like that, and it's almost trivial, right? And it's a great experience because you get to work out a little bit. You get to stand. It feels better than sitting, in the box. But and I'm sure with time we'll find that. But here's a little sneak preview of what that could be like. We're coming down into this park, this modernist park that was built in the 1960s, 1970s. And it's named after a visionary urban planner. Oh gosh, the name's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it right now. I could have researched this a little better. I'll make sure to do that in the synopsis video. And so they'd cleared out Brooklyn at this point, for better or worse. They did. Probably for worse in that like the preservation of equity was lost, right? Like, but I think the housing itself was probably like unpowered, unwatered, right? So there was that. But then we didn't stop at that. Down at the bottom of the park, but it's just like 1970s, concrete everywhere, these abstract, brutal shapes. It's kind of fun. I'll take the kids there and I'll encourage them to play on the sculpture, and they kind of get it. And then the view that you get of Uptown and the buildings themselves, it's just it's almost alien. It's almost otherworldly, right? I can only imagine like what people thought when we were like the boomers experienced, where they were actively ripping out these classic cities, this classic architecture, and replacing it with like these giant slabs that are best experienced at 35 miles per hour. Like, it's almost like, why did we do that? I don't know, right? Like, I mean, it's impressive. I'm always impressed when I like take a photo of like a large piece of architecture, monumental architecture. Like everything was a monument. That's what it comes down to, is that we took all of this stuff that wasn't necessarily a monument, but it was human scale, right? So we pop out and smile, right? And replace it with these giant monuments. And when they're well landscaped and stuff, they're fun. And the great thing is, now we live in a world where we have the technology to experience this monumental architecture that does have basic utilities like power, and preserve it while still kind of getting to experience it on a human level. But so we're passing this grove of trees, this little orchard here, which I love so much. And we see kind of a vignette of, so this is like the old downtown Brooklyn core. This is like where, how do I do this gently? So on the left was an old gym or school, and then on the other left is the old United Way. And then on the right we see this building. This was the commercial hub of Brooklyn. This is where, if you wanted to get loans done, you could do that here. It was the center of black commerce, and there's a church there. as well as that building that we went past. They still do art shows and stuff in the building. They have a cool, like, funky... Anyway, if you look here, coming up, we'll see artist Stephanie Mills, who sang "I've Never Known Love Like This Before," signed at the sidewalk. She also did... I have a Stephanie Mills. So one time, I was living in New York. I was in Conway doing some shopping in my little outer borough neighborhood. I think I was in grad school. And she did a song with Teddy Pendergrass, Two Hearts. And the person I was shopping with, we just looked up at each other and we smiled. It was a good memory. It was a core memory. It was 15 years ago now. It's a core memory. Anyway, so on the upper right-hand side, we'll explore that. But that's where the cotton platform used to be. So that was like the main. This is it. This is like where the rail yard was. And they cleared that stuff out first. And then you look at these buildings coming up. We'll explore them more when I do the Uptown thing. But it's a cool story. It's kind of a sad story. It's a happy story, depending upon, things always turn out for the best. But it's got intrigue. It's a dramatic story. And then there's some vision too that you can have there. But Stephanie Mills. All right, we're coming up West 4th Street here. So we're going to start at the CPCC campus. We look at that beautiful statue there. I can get lost looking at that statue. It's got a lot going on. I think it's kind of a feminist statue, but I don't quite know. And behind us is the Overcash building. So CPCC has a fun story. It was originally the Central High School, and after the middle of the 20th century, these folks, the GIs, needed to be educated. So the GI Bill passed, and people started getting college stuff and doing more commercial work rather than industrial work. And CPCC was just one of the two major institutions set up in Charlotte for that. The other one is University of North Carolina at Charlotte. But you can kind of see this is a beautiful little section of town, the old dairy farm. They put these boulevards through it, and it's easy to like lose appreciation for it all. The tunnel vision required at 35 miles per hour. We're focusing on making it to the next block through the next light and stuff. But we're crossing over. There's this statue here dedicated to this guy, Captain Jack. He's a Paul Revere-like character for Charlotte. He rode his horse out maybe somewhere to the Appalachians to get reinforcements to come fight the British, basically. Back when the Charlotteans decided they were done. They were done with so it's an interesting story. Anyway, look at this beautiful park. It's a beautiful park. They do like runs and stuff out of there sometimes. I really love being on the Greenway, especially when this time of year that we're looking at, which is the late autumn, because the temperatures have come down. You see people come out from neighborhoods. So the interesting thing, so Brooklyn Village, right? This is the last bit of Brooklyn Village, and it's kind of it was lost, but across that Kings, there's a neighborhood still, Cherry, where you've seen me do other stuff. And that kind of still retains the same flavor as the Brooklyn Village. I'd assume. I don't really know what Brooklyn Village is like. I've seen the monuments and seen the stories and the tales of life, and frankly, they seem very similar to all of the stories and life tales you see about any close knit urban neighborhood. It's like we all knew each other. We all did stuff. We have stories. We all grew up together. And it's the thing. Like when you have human-sized cities, human-sized environment, then humans are there. Whereas what we ended up replacing it with, and the deed had to be done because we needed modern housing with things like power, running water, was insulation, right? All that stuff, air conditioning, is it's less human scale. And people, they get in their cars and they go live elsewhere. But those same stories are still happening, right? Like kids are growing up together. They're learning about their world together, and life goes on, I guess. But here we are. We're going up East 4th Street. So this is a major conduit because there's some highway exits. So they just made it one way. And these trees that they planted. So I don't know when they. So the court is on the left and the jail is on the right. And then I don't know when this all went in. It looks like the court came in later than the jail. The jail looks very much 1970s. There's a county commissioner. So this is like Civic Row, right? There's the county commissioners. And then there's a civic center, that sort of postmodernish looking building at a side is the. And look, there's the classical building, which is it's a pretty building, temple architecture. I think that's the old city hall, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I don't know. And then coming up on the left, we'll see the new civic center. So that's where it's really not that new. I think it was built in '88, and that's where a lot of the city offices are now. And I think this is the old courthouse, which is now the DA's office. I decided to look at this monument. I know what it looks like. It's World War I. Looks like a doughboy. So that gives you some idea when this was put in. I think Charlotte at that point might have had like 50,000 people. So it was very, very small. This might have been like the edge of town at the time. And that's the old city hall we're looking at there, I think. I don't quite know. Maybe it's the courthouse. But yeah, no idea that any of that would have been there. Well, I guess you would have had an idea that was there, but it's just a snapshot of what could have been around it, right? And then later, in the modern time, it all was raised and replaced with what we see here. So on the right is the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Charlotte branch. And then on the left is a parking deck for it. And I don't mind the parking decks. I think that would be cool though is if on some of them they like put trees on the upper deck as well. And then coming up on the left, from videos that I've done, you'll see that's that dramatic setting. That it's an old bank that used to be on Tryon Street, but it got moved there in the 80s. And then we have this view coming into Uptown, right? Very 20th century, late 20th century. It was very sleek with one or two postmoderns, but very, very sleek. And we're gonna deviate a little bit. So on the right is the bus shed. So that's when we finally electrify, it's gonna be a much nicer area because it won't be stained with diesel soot. And then we're coming in. So so this is the old rail yard. It was a cotton platform. It was a factory. All of it's here, right? This was a bustling hub for like freight work and for manufacturing work. We're going up onto the platform, and we'll see some of the vestiges of the rail yard that was here, where the rail cars would be loaded with cotton. And now it's just a parking lot, which is used lightly, from what I understand. It overlooks the light rail tracks. And then I think what was lower was a factory. But you see those tracks that are kind of lost in the ground. We're going to go over them and explore them a little bit here. So yeah, it was a freight yard. And it looks like it continued on a little bit. We're elevated. So if you're wondering where the old cotton platform was, this was it. So this was the kind of, you put the rail yard on the edge of town. This was the edge of town at one point, whenever the railroad kind of came in and decided to get big. And then there was a big factory here as well that I don't know if it was cottonseed oil. So Charlotte ended up specializing in cottonseed oil rather than they were still weaving as well, but I think it was real specialty was cottonseed oil. And it did that until about the 1920s when the boll weevil came along, which has subsequently been controlled, but it's still an issue that needs to be managed. Anyway, the cotton production has gone elsewhere in the country. And we're about to go underneath the railroad here. and I think we'll come up Trade Street. That's a fun one. And then yeah, we're coming up East Fourth. And we're in the old sort of main city now. We're going up into Uptown. There's a parking deck. There's a sleek building. I just learned to appreciate looking at, doing all this exploration. I just like it. It's like I think it's the last modern building. You can even see like the start of postmodernism, isn't it? But it's sleek, but it's like a little playful. In any case, the next video will probably try to be a synopsis. I'll write something for it. Maybe I'll edit it, and that's it. Check you later.